Hello everybody, my name is Miss Angela and I am one of the children's librarians at the Cuyahoga Falls Library. Today I'm going to go ahead and walk you through a paint tutorial to show you some of the different paintings that you can create with the Creative Canvases kit we sent home with you through Cozy Up with CFL. Now, YouTube is full of different acrylic painting tutorials, so you are certainly welcome to go in a different direction if the examples that I have for you today aren't really speaking to you. You especially have additional options if you have some extra paintbrushes and some additional colors of acrylic paint at home. But today I really wanted to focus on the types of paintings that you might be able to create with just the two brushes that we sent you. So you got a flat brush as well as a detail brush to go with your 5x7 canvas. We're going to stick with the three colors of paint you received. You should have titanium white, Mars black, and phthalo blue. So these colors actually work really well to create either a nighttime setting or a wintry setting. If you refer to the email that you received with this kit, I've included some links for various tutorials to inspire you. But I wanted to show you real quickly the paintings that I created using just these brushes and just these colors. So my first one is a stag in front of the moon. This was a really simple one. I know the stag might look intimidating, but the great thing about silhouettes is you're really just breaking those down into shapes. You don't have to worry about angles or three-dimensional details. It's really just shapes. So I promise you it is simpler than it looks. I also created a line of trees with a moonlit sky and a lake reflecting those trees. So I'm going to walk you through some of the techniques that I used to create these paintings, but really we very much encourage you to make these your own. You know, we want you to be excited and proud of your final product. So a couple things to keep in mind before we get started. Acrylics are a pretty fast drying paint. And this can make blending tricky, so patience is key here. You might need to go over the same area a few times until you get it exactly the way you want it. Keep in mind, though, that brush strokes aren't necessarily a bad thing. That's one of the things I really liked about this stag painting. You can see, I think I did some decent blending around the moon, but you can definitely see some of the brush strokes, but that was an effect that I personally really liked. By the same token, if you really overwork an area and just keep going back over it and back over it, it can start to look really muddy and monotone. So that's something to keep in mind too. There's kind of that happy medium where you're getting a blending effect, but you haven't just puddled all of your paints together. Acrylics can also be fairly thick. You can thin them a little bit with water, but you don't want to thin them too much. This breaks down the binders in the paint and could lead to flaking later on. So a little bit of water is okay, but you don't want to use too much. I would also recommend that you get a nice big, preferably glass jar for your paintbrush. This will keep your water from getting murky and keep you from having to run to the sink every couple minutes to switch out your water. We also recommend having a paper towel nearby so that you can dab your brush dry. If you are brand new to painting, you may want to grab some scrap paper and sort of sketch out an idea of what you would like your final painting to look like, but you can also just jump right in and see how things go. So I think I'm going to go ahead and we'll switch to the top-down view so I can show you some of these painting techniques. I think that's everything you need to know to get started. So I hope you are as excited as I am to make a really lovely piece of art today. All right, so before we get started, you're going to want to make yourself a little bit of a paint palette. A small paper plate works great for this. You could also maybe put down some wax paper, a plastic container. There are all sorts of things that you can use for a palette. As you can see here, I've got my white, my blue, and my black. You really don't need very large amounts. But the reason you don't want to keep them in the little cups that they arrived in is because we're going to be mixing them. So You probably won't actually need all of the paint that you got in your cups. I would sort of dole it out a bit at a time because, again, you don't want it all to spread around and then dry, since acrylic does dry very quickly. So we have our palette, we have our brushes. I've got my cup of water. Again, if you can get something bigger than that, that's probably ideal. And then I do have my canvas. So something I just wanted to point out here is that you want to think of your painting as having layers. So we're going to start with the background. The stag and even these hills are going to come later. So we're going to build back to front. And you also are going to want to start with the lightest part of the background. In this case, it's the moon. So get an idea of, where you would like things to be situated. And then we can go ahead and dive in. So I am going to wet my brush just a little, just literally dipping it in and then wiping it off on the rim of my cup. And as I mentioned before, you're going to make sure you want to have a paper towel nearby. Then I'm going to go ahead and dive in with just the white. So I'm going to pull a little bit of this out. And you definitely want to make sure that, you're getting it in the brush so that you're picking up a fair amount on the bristles. Now, for this moon, if you are not feeling super confident, you might want to find something to trace a circle so, that it can be precisely the shape you want it to be. I'm just going to go ahead and try freehand. So I'm going to start right in the middle, and I know that right now this is really hard to see because it's white on white, but you can see a little bit of a moon taking place. And don't be afraid to go back and get some paint. Honestly, with the size of these paintbrushes and the canvas we're working with, I don't think it's super likely that you would put such a glob on here that, we couldn't work with it. So I'm just going to keep spreading this out. And I know that I want some hills here and then my stag to be on the hill in front of the moon. So I think this is a pretty good location. So we're just going to keep spreading this out a bit. Once you have kind of a general white circle where you would like your moon, then we're going to start adding just a little bit of a lighter blue. So the way that I would recommend doing this is take a scoop of some white and then add just a touch of phthalo blue. That's a bit of a tongue twister to say. Phthalo blue is really, really, really strong. So it's not going to take very much to get a really pale blue. So that's why, I would recommend taking that larger scoop dollop of white, because you can see even that is quite the difference between the white of the moon, and we added just the tiniest bit of phthalo blue. And like I said, again, blending here is going to be a process. So don't worry if you're looking at harsher lines than you would like them to be. We will come back and address this. Right now, we're just kind of getting a background layer on. I feel like I should also maybe make a disclaimer here that I am not an artist, which is the beauty of this, because if I can do this, you guys can definitely do this. So we're going back with a little more phthalo blue. I want a bit of a darker circle coming out of here. And see, sometimes when you put it on your canvas, you realize, oh, that's actually closer than I would like it to be, in which case we just go get a little bit more phthalo and we darken it up. Yeah, that's a little bit more, a little closer to what I wanted. Like I said, we are not worried about things looking perfect at this point. We will be going back over this until we get things to our liking. So I'm going to take a little bit more white, and then this time even some more blue. Now, one other thing to keep in mind here is that you also have black in your kit. And, you know, if we keep adding the phthalo to the white, we're eventually going to get like a really nice, bright, vibrant blue. But for a nighttime scene or even a winter scene, that might not be exactly what we want. So we might want to go take a touch of black and literally just a tiny, tiny amount and bring that into the mix, because that is going to take things in more of a blue-gray direction, which I personally really like. And that's the fun thing about a palette. You know, you can really experiment with all of these different colors and get a sense for what you really like. You see how this blue here just isn't as bright as the blue that we have over here. So I really like to have some of that variation. We're gonna go add some more blue. You can see here again, that's quite a lot brighter. If we add in a bit more black, it's going to be much more in that like dusty gray. And like I said, at this point, I'm really just fussing with getting that background fairly covered. So just kind of a gradual shift from that white to darker blues at the corner. Let's see, we're going to go ahead, we will take some white. Now, I have seen some artists who do a really great job at keeping paint on just the tip of the brush. I am not one of those individuals, but if you're able to do so, more power to you. You do want to keep an eye on if things seem to be getting dry. You don't want paint to dry at the base of the brush, as it'll cause the bristles to spread. So, and like, see, I just put that on. It's way lighter. So we're going to add quite a bit of black and some more blue. Okay, there we go. That's more of that darker shade that I wanted. Okay. Now, as you can see here, this does not look remotely like my finished product here. You can maybe see the beginnings of it, but this is certainly not what I'm intending my final product to look like. So at this point, I'm actually going to rinse my brush a bit, just because I think it's getting pretty clogged. and then dab it off on my paper towel, making sure to wipe off the paint that had accumulated on this metal part here. Okay, so we're going to give that a rinse. And then, let's see, I think that I want to blend, really, that light blue isn't too far off from the white, but the layers that continue out from that are quite a dramatic change. So I'm going to experiment with this a bit. And this is where, we're going to be doing some building and blending. Now, one of the things that I actually really like, I like taking a bit of white and loading my brush up with that. But then also taking just a little dab of phthalo blue. Oh, that may be too much. And then bringing that in. So not blending it on the palette, but actually just bringing it directly to the canvas. I think that can have some really cool effects. And I think that is really helpful when it comes to the blending part of things. You see how that's already looking a little bit more intentional. Now, I'm probably going to take a break from talking for a little while and just focus on getting this background looking the way that I would like it to. So I'll probably speed up this part of the video, and we'll check back in once we're ready to start adding some details. Oh, one thing to remember, make sure you rinse your brush before you go back in to do anything on the moon, since that is a pure white at this point. You don't want to introduce those blues and blacks to the lightest part of your picture. You might also, as I'm doing here, want to get a sense of what your darkest color is going to be. So you can put that really dark color in these outer corners and even down along the side. And then that gives you sort of the goal as to what you're going to be blending things to. All right, now something to keep in mind is through all of that extra blending, I really haven't worried about rinsing my brush off at all. With a limited palette like this, we're only working with black, white, and blue. So you don't have to worry too much that you're going to mix up colors and, say for example, if you had orange and purple on your palette, if you're mixing those together, you're going to end up with a really muddy brown, which may not have been your intention. So I am going to go ahead and rinse my brush out really, really well because I want to go back in and clean up this moon. As you can see, it's definitely looking a little bit lopsided right now, but I'm not worried about it. So I'm going to go back to my palette, which is a mess, as you can see, and make sure I'm picking up just white, okay? And then I'm going to take this and we're going to go fill out our moon a little bit more. Okay. The other thing here is you definitely want to make sure that all of the blue paint is dry. I'm actually seeing, a little bit over here that's still wet. If I bring the white paint close to that, it's just going to mix as opposed to covering. So that is definitely something to keep in mind. Now, I actually really like using my brush kind of like this. It's almost sideways to help get that clean, neat line. You can turn your canvas if you need. Whatever makes this easier for you. So don't be afraid to go back and get some more white. And we just want to make sure that we've got a nice clean line. You can see here it's still a little bit transparent with some blue. That's fine. We'll go put another coat over that in a little bit. And we're just gonna bring this out until it is as circular as we would like it to be. If you are very impatiently waiting for something to dry, you can certainly go get a hairdryer, and that will help speed up the process. I find that a little bit of patience with acrylic paint, though, works just fine, especially if we're putting on thinner layers. Okay, that's certainly looking better than it was a moment ago. I might come in and touch this up a little bit there just because I'm not super happy with that line. Okay, I think I'm pretty happy with this. Again, this part is really up to you. If you want to, get a really, really smooth blend, you can certainly do that. If you want it to be a little bit more pronounced, you know, this part is up to however you would like your finished product to look. I'm going to rinse my brush one more time because I'm going to go back in here with just a little bit of white. And get some of those spots where the blue was showing through a bit. And just really carefully take it around the edge. Okay. All right, so from here, now if you guys think about the moon has texture. The moon has craters and dimension. So what we're going to do, I'm actually going to give myself just a little bit more white. All right. So to achieve some of that dimension in the moon, I want to take just the slightest bit of black. And we're going to mix up a really, really pale gray. And when I say really, really pale, I mean really, really pale. This looks like a light gray, but if you compare it to the white, it's going to be quite the contrast. And I want something to start that is way more subtle. So keep mixing in the white. I think I'm pretty happy with this gray. So you want to load up your brush and then go ahead, whoop, palette almost cut away from me there. Go ahead and dab it straight up and down on your palette. Okay, because we don't want big glops of paint. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my brush and do kind of a stippling effect. And you know what? I think I can go even lighter. I think that's still just a little darker than I would like. So I'm going to keep mixing some lighter, some white in. And you can either do that stippling or you can kind of lay it down like this. Just keep away from the very edge of the rim. Okay. So I'm going to bring this up closer so you can get a better look. You can see we're just creating some pockets here. And you may even want to go back and get a little bit of pure white on your brush if you would like to soften that blend a little. One of the great things about acrylic painting is it's fairly forgiving. You can really go back and fix anything that you don't like. So if there's something that you're not liking on your painting, fix it. You can paint right back over it, you can lighten it, you can try to blend it out. There's all sorts of things that you can do. Okay, so that is my first layer of some gray, but then we're going to go back and get just a touch more black. And we're going to darken this gray back up a bit. Now, when it comes to your moon, you may decide that you actually want it to have some bluer tones, and that is entirely up to you. So you don't have to do just this gray that I'm showing you. You can add in a little bit of blue. You can really do whatever you like with it. So I'm just taking this darker gray and kind of deepening some of these areas. I don't want all of the gray to be uniform. And again, this is an area that it is really up to you how dark you want to take some of these. You know, if you're feeling like that's not enough contrast, add a darker gray. You know, if you want to signify some really deep craters, you can certainly do that. If you feel that, oh, I've gone too far, that's no problem. Just go back and get some more of your white. Mix up that lighter gray again. And just take that around some of your edges. If you're going lighter, you may want to rinse your brush out first just so you're not incorporating more of those dark colors. I think I'm pretty pleased with this. So I'm going to go ahead, rinse my brush. And next, we are going to move on to our hills. So you can see here, I did not worry about bringing my sky all the way down because I knew I was going to create some hills. So because I want some contrast with the sky, and the sky is gray, blue, or I'm sorry, not gray, black, blue, and white, I think for the hills, I'm going to try to go with a true navy. And so I'm going to take some of this black and mix it with just the phthalo blue. And this is going to give me, I think, a really cool navy. Now, these hills can be as complex or as simple as you like. So I'm just going to follow along with the border that I've kind of already created. And when I say simple or complex, I mean, if you want to just create kind of a hilly single layer of ground, you can absolutely do that. That's basically what I'm doing right here. If you would like to create some hills, you could certainly do that as well. But honestly, I'm pretty happy with just this, and I think I'm going to leave this as is. The cool thing about the black and the navy is that you almost get a bit of a translucent effect, which I think does add some depth and dimension here. Okay, so we now have our ground. Now here is where we're going to get out our detail brush. And we're going to use the black paint for our stag. Now, at this point, I would recommend pulling up on maybe your phone or a picture out of a book, a reference for the stag. So it's always a good idea to have something that you can look at so you're getting the shape correct. Okay, so I'm going to take my detail brush, and I have dipped it in a little bit of water because we want this black to spread pretty nicely. And the best advice I've seen for working with the detail brush is as you're dipping it in paint, you can kind of twist it as you come out so that it keeps that really nice point. That point is going to really help us out with this. So let's see. I think if we're looking at our stag, so let me bring my previous painting over here. And as you can see, you've almost got, there's almost a circle here in the middle, and then another circle for his hindquarters, and then kind of a like curvy rectangle shape coming up here. You can see maybe some triangles in the areas where his feet or his legs meet his body. So I'm going to say I would like him to be standing right about here. And I'm going to start with that circle. Now, for these bigger sections, you may in fact want to use your flat brush. That's really up to you. I just like the control that the detail brush affords. And you really want to make sure you don't need to press hard with the detailed brush. That will cause it to kind of splay out. So we're going to start with our main circle here, and then we're going to add a bit of a circle right next to it. And these will be his, this rather, will be his hindquarters. Now honestly, the first painting that I did this with, I really thought my stag looked like a llama. There was something very llama-ish about him. I think it was the neck. My coworker also thought it might be the lack of a tail, so we're going to go ahead and add just a bit of a bump for a tail there. Okay, so then we're going to take this up to create his neck. And this is probably going to involve just some fiddling until you get the proportions the exact way you would like them. And remember, at this point, it might be a little annoying, but if you make a misstep, if you decide, oh, I really don't like the way that this turned out, mix up some more of your background color and paint over it. Let it dry, and then you can give it another go. Okay, now we want to make sure we're not getting too tall up here. Again, I think that's where some of the llama-ness comes in. Okay. So I'm going to make his neck a little thicker, I think. Okay. That, I think, is looking pretty good. Okay, so now it comes time to do these legs. Let's see, I'm going to start, I think, with the back ones. And we're going to come down in kind of a triangle. So a triangle, and then their legs actually come forward a bit. Now, something that I'm realizing as I'm doing this, please remember, I made no claims being an artist. I think that my ground is not quite high enough. And there's a really easy fix for that. We're going to go back to our flat brush. We're going to grab some more of that navy blue paint. And we're just going to bring this hill up. Okay, and I'm fine with it coming up a little bit higher because that's going to make it look like he's standing, in front of that bit of hill in the background. So give that a moment to dry. We didn't put on a very thick layer, so I'm not too worried. And then we can also go ahead and bring down his leg here. Okay, and just use a very gentle hand, keep that guy nice and thin. Again, we're going to do a bit of a triangle coming back this way. Okay, so he's got 2 front legs down. And let's go ahead and figure out his back leg. I think I'm going to bring his back leg down there. Okay? So I don't know if you can see that well enough. All right. Now, let's see. I think the next thing that I want to tackle is his ears. So for that, definitely make sure you don't have too much paint on your brush. You don't want really blobby ears. And then we are going to paint a curved line that way, and a curved line this way, and do the same on the other side. Work, nice and slow here. You can always go back and get a little bit more paint if you need. If you feel that you want to finesse the shape, you can always go a little bit bigger. That's way easier to do than deciding, oh wait, I wanted those to be smaller. You can certainly fuss with, turn your canvas whatever way you're going to find most helpful. I like that. So I think we're done with his ears, and then it's just time to do his antlers. Okay. So you're going to load up your brush. Definitely twist it, roll it as you bring it out so that it's that nice point. And then we're going to start down here and just come up and out. A nice, gentle swooping. Okay, and you definitely want to try your best to get that other side to match. Okay. Just go nice and light because, again, you can always make it a little bit bigger. It's much harder to make it smaller. Okay, so I think that's looking pretty good. And then we're just going to go ahead and follow this curve here and very lightly come up with another bit of antler. Now, if you are having difficulty getting this paint to spread, that might be a good time to wet your brush a little and water down your black paint. Remember, just a touch. You don't want to water it down a lot, but watering it down a little bit will make it easier to spread. Okay? So water that paint down, and then we'll put another guy over there. Yeah, this might be a little too far away for you to see, but the stroke that I just put down after having wet my paint a little is much, much smoother. So we're going to bring Another little spike up that way. And one up there. One more this way. Okay, and now our stag has some beautiful antlers. All right, now this was the point where I finished my other stag painting, but I wanted to show you a few more options, things that you could do. So, for example, in the second painting that I did some of these trees. This is exactly what Bob Ross was talking about when he said happy little trees. These are so easy to do, and I think they look really good when you're all done. So I'm going to add a few background trees. So I'm going to take my detail brush and we'll load it up with some black paint. And then we're going to draw just a wavy line coming up this way. We might need to go back and get some more. Okay. And I want that to be a nice tall tree to look like, you know, it's right by our stag friend. So we're going to make that nice and tall. Now we're going to return to our flat brush, and we're basically going to do the same thing that we did with the moon. We are going to, well, first of all, make sure it's nice and clean. There's no more blue paint on it. Then we're going to come in and get some black. We're going to make sure the brush is pretty loaded up. And then probably on your paper towel, actually, you can blot it a couple times, because then we're just going to come in and blot like that. Okay? So you want to make sure that you have a fair amount of paint on your brush, but you don't want it to be blobby. And we're just going to go back and forth to give the idea of a tree. Now, I definitely know that I want my bottom branches here to be quite a bit fuller. But again, you know, this is something that we can just build up nice and easy. So again, it's always easier to add as opposed to take away. So don't worry about getting it done quickly. Just make sure that it's looking like you want it to. Especially when you get up here at the top, you might need to twist your brush a little. Make sure that you don't have too much paint, or it's going to give you some very dark blobs. All right, see, that is such a cool pine tree. I love this technique. I think it's really fun. If you are more interested in a regular tree, there's something, you know, I think very beautiful about a spindly winter tree. Again, I think you would be well served to water down your black paint just a titch. We're going to start out the same way that we did our pine tree, but this is going to be a lot more like the antlers. So draw a trunk coming up. You don't want it to be perfectly straight. And we're going to go back, get some more black paint, and we'll have some of these tree branches very delicately come out like this. Now, this is the detail brush I'm using, because that's what's going to give us those really lovely, lovely branches. Okay, and it's not a bad idea to start with more pressure and then let up as you reach the ends. And you can go back in and fill in any parts that are looking like the coverage isn't quite what you want it to be. And then you'll just keep adding branches until it looks like the silhouette that you want it to be. Again, just being very, very delicate here. Again, if you're having trouble spreading, you may want to go back and get just a touch more water. Okay, so I think that at least is enough to give you an idea of some different ways that you can do some trees and add a little bit more interest to your picture. If you would prefer to do this kind of scene, I simply made this lake area a little lighter than the night sky, did the line of trees, and then created a reflection with less black paint. You know, they're not as big, they're not as defined, but it's enough to give that idea of a reflection. You can see here I've also got a little bit of reflection for the moon, and that was literally just loading up my flat brush and gently scrubbing back and forth. All right. One other technique that I quite like is if you take your detail brush, once again, a little bit of water, and I'm going to go in and get some of that navy that I had mixed up. And this takes a delicate hand. You definitely want to make sure you have that point. But you can add some grass if you want. And I'm telling you, this, you want to be so very light when you are trying to do this grass. I'm barely touching the point to the paper, but it gives you these really lovely little blades of grass, and I think just adds, you know, some interesting texture and dimension to your painting. If you want to go back and add some stars in the sky, you can certainly do that. I think I'm really happy with this, so I'm going to go ahead and end it here. I really hope you guys consider sending us some of your final paintings. I would love to see what you end up coming up with. And like I said, YouTube is full of some really great tutorials by actual artists who will definitely be able to probably explained things a little bit better than I did. But I hope you had fun with this, and I hope that you are able to, maybe make painting part of your weekly routine going forward. I have found that it's a really lovely way to spend some of this time indoors that we're doing this winter. So, all right, that's all for us, but definitely keep an eye out. We have a lot more Cozy Up with CFL take-home kits on the horizon. So we definitely hope to see you signed up for those. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.